And welcome back to the Standard, a fantasy football podcast, episode 3. Hey there, Rook. I'm your host, Jono. This is my co-host, Chris. Welcome back, bud.
What's going on, man? I'm excited. The draft is awesome. It was really cool. A lot of surprises, a lot of predictive things that happened. So it's exciting to see new faces and new places. So, now let's get into it, with evaluating kind of what our thoughts are on these guys.
Yeah. I mean, we're going to give everybody an opportunity to hear our thoughts on a few names that we like a lot coming out of this draft that are going to have fantasy value this season. And we're going to start with an obvious one here with Bijan Robinson. And, give me your thoughts on this guy. I mean, they take him high up in the draft at 8? It's a no-brainer that this guy is going to have an impact on the Atlanta Falcons.
Yeah, I mean it's no surprise on what they're trying to do there. They're going to play good defense. Again, this is a fairly weak division, and Bijan's going to come in immediately and make an impact. I mean, they have Tyler Algier, they use Cordell Patterson, but this is going to be the Bijan Robinson show. He has superior talent. I mean, everywhere that we thought he was going to go, we thought Dallas, we thought Philly, we thought that he was going to go to those teams and just instantly start. So if we thought he was going to do that there, then we have to think that he's going to do that in Atlanta. There's weapons around him. They got good young weapons around him. It's going to be kind of what does Ritter do? What's the quarterback situation? And because of that unknown, you can really assume that they're going to play good defense and they're going to run the football. So expect a lot of work from both Algier and Bijan, but I think instantly he can make an impact. Like where do you see him kind of going in like mock drafts or potential fantasy drafts?
I mean, to me, this guy, you got to take a chance on the first round for him. The volume is going to be there. This is not quite like Saquon Barkley first round. I equate it to some of the other backs that we saw, like your young Dalvin Cooks, a couple of these guys that come in the league that dominated in high school, in college. However, going into the draft, they didn't have that caliber, that elite caliber that Saquon had at number 2 overall, where everybody was taking him as the first pick off the draft, but not quite as a question mark as Christian McCaffrey was coming out of college, a guy who was great, but didn't go in your first rounds or your fantasy drafts. So I do expect this guy in the tail end of the draft. Just think Najee Harris. I think that's a perfect comparison. Najee Harris was touted coming out of Alabama. Everybody's like, this guy's first round talent. He started off as like early second round, late first round in everybody's mock drafts. And then all of a sudden, right before the drafts happened, he flew up to like top 5. People wanted him. I think Bijan's going to be in that same space.
Volume there.
Yeah.
I think it's a really good comparison because he's going Najee went to a team that plays good defense. They wanted to run the football. He was getting 300 touches, close to 400 touches in his first year. And so I think Bijan could have that. The only difference is that Algier is still there. Patterson is still there. They still have guys that can run the football. So I wouldn't expect Bijan to have a 350 touch season, but I think he could be highly productive with 250 touches. And so that's kind of the offset there is I kind of agree with you. It's late first round, depending on kind of what you want to do, but late first round, early second round, I mean, you have to take a chance on a guy that has that kind of talent and is going to a team that wants to run the football.
Correct. I think the biggest thing, in my opinion, here that is different than some of these other backs too as well is he does have the ability to catch the ball at the backfield. I think they're going to want to use that. I know Cordell Patterson has been that guy for them in the past. He's aging. He's still got speed, but I don't expect them to lean heavily on him. I think they'll have Algier out there and they'll give a change of pace to Bijan here and there. But when you get a guy that goes for 1,500, almost 1,600 yards with a 6.1 average carry, on top of that, the guy caught 300 yards, I think it was 300 yards, 2 touchdowns last year. The guy can do a lot after the catch. So he's going to get that opportunity. So even if he does have anywhere between 250 to 300 touches in terms of rushes, he's going to also, I expect, to have about 30 catches on the season too.
Yeah, with a lot of these rookie players that we're going to talk about, I think what's really important to consider with them is not just the talent, but system that they go into. And I think he's in a really good system. And same with the next guy that we're going to talk about.
Yeah, Jahmyr Gibbs is our
Yeah.
our next guy we want to highlight, and obviously another big first-round pick that was a little bit unexpected, but the Lions went up and they got their guy. And we talk about a guy that can catch the ball out of the backfield as well as to run the ball well. It's exactly who we're talking about here. Different type of runner, but overall, this guy is elusive. He makes big plays. Had never rushed for 1,000 yards in his career, but did have over 6 yards per carry. But talk about 44 receptions for 444 yards last year. The guy can do things with the football when it's in his hands.
Yeah, I mean, it's exact. So I was watching the live draft that you and Kane did, and when this pick was made, I was just like, Swift's out of there. Swift is out of there. And with them bringing in Montgomery, it's very clear that they wanted someone that's going to be explosive. And I mean, they got someone that's explosive. This team is speed, and they're going to kill you with it. They are going to just absolutely kill you with it. Gibbs has that explosive ability. He's not only elusive, but he can break the big play. And that is something that Detroit wants to do. They want to run the football, and they want to break big plays off running the football. So I think this is a perfect fit for him. Not only is he a great receiver out of the backfield, they just released a report today that he's going to be used as kind of a slot receiver. They're going to split him out too. So we might even see some sets where, even if you're saying he might lose touches to Montgomery, sure, but he might be in a 2 running back set with Montgomery, and where he might be in the slot and be getting receptions there. So, I mean, you think on the goal line that, they might run some stretch plays to the outside, and you look at his highlight tape from college. And I mean, on the goal line, he's elusive. He can get that 5 yards and break it into the end zone. So I think this is a really, really good fit for him, especially on what Detroit wants to do with their offense. And then talk about when Jamison Williams gets back. I mean, that's going to be speed everywhere.
Yeah, and that I just was going to piggyback off that comment. Is they took Jamison Williams on purpose because they wanted guys to be speedy, stretch the field. Now you take a running back that can turn the corner and hit a home run. So Dan Campbell's not afraid to take these guys. I mean, take a page out of Mike McDaniel's book in terms of speed. But when you look at the Lions, they have built themselves into a decent defense that keeps them in ball games on top of an offense that has a solid quarterback that can just get people the ball. They're not asking too much of Jared Goff. And now you've got a running back that is Swift equivalent. And if he can stay healthy, that's what their, I think, missing link was. They just couldn't hold 2 running backs healthy the whole year. And they had to dip into their backup backfield. So I like having David Montgomery there for Jahmyr Gibbs because Jahmyr Gibbs isn't going to be a bell cow and expect to get that because he hasn't had to do that yet in his career. I mean, he's literally had no more than 150 rushes attempts in his career ever in a season. So give him that in a season, up it to 200, give Montgomery another 200. There you go. You got yourself a winning duo for your team. And I like the potential of Gibbs in that backfield. He is going to bring the spark that they need, and it's what Swift gave them, but just couldn't stay on the field, like you said.
Yeah, I mean, I think 150 touches is going to be enough. Like, he has that explosive ability, so he has that long touchdown ability. And when we're talking about like at the end of season, it's a lot of those top 10 running backs, it's just volume. But if you're having guys that are going to break off long chunks, which he can do, and you have that spelled with it's essentially going to be an upgraded version of what DeAndre Swift was last year. A faster, more elusive DeAndre Swift. So I love this pick. And I mean, like where do you see him getting drafted? Like, I probably wouldn't go and touch him in the first 4 rounds, but probably around 5, round 6, if he's there, and I'm already stacked up at running back. As a number 3 or number 4 running back, if there's no real good wide receivers on the board, why wouldn't I want to take a flyer on a guy like this? Now that Swift's out, I think it just increases his value more.
Yeah, I see. To me, I think taking him 4th round is a good gamble to take. I think for sure he's going to get more touches than David Montgomery. And I think at the end of the day, he's going to have more potential to get in the end zone. I don't think they're going to run the same type of offense where they're going to try and plug the ball in the end zone with one running back every single time. I think they're going to get a little bit more crafty and kick less field goals by putting somebody like him in the backfield that can do a lot more things than just David Montgomery. That being said, he's not going to be a solo back, so there's no way I'm taking him in the top 3 rounds. I take him mid to late 4th round is my opinion, just because his numbers could equate to a solid RB2 with, depending upon his touchdowns, low RB1 ceiling. And I think that's what you're going to find in the 4th round, especially if you took a running back in the 1st round and then went for your wide receivers or a quarterback early on. So, I mean, we mentioned 2 guys here that are definites that are going to be off the board early. Is there anybody in your mind that is, I don't want to use the word sleeper this early, but is there anybody in the mind that you have an eye on in this draft that you'd like to take a chance on late rounds that can give you value, whether it be early in the season, immediately, or somebody that could be a potential league winner because their value just increases late?
Yeah, I mean, I'm repping the Jets here, and I love the pick that they made with Israel Abanikanda. I'm gonna get this, and because his name is so
Abanikanda,
awesome.
squish banana.
I know, right? I love him early in the season. I think he's going to compete for getting a lot of touches while Breece Hall is coming back, and with Michael Carter and Zonovan Knight. So whenever you see that kind of speed, a 4.2 speed from a running back, I mean, he has the it factor. They love this guy when they drafted him. And I think when Breece Hall comes back, having the speed, and then Breece, I mean, both of them have explosive speed and can break off long touchdowns. I mean, I'm obviously I'm a Jets fan, so I got to watch a lot of it, but I keep seeing the highlight tapes and the tape versus Virginia Tech last year. Anytime you have a guy that goes for 320 and 6 touchdowns in a single game, I mean, you got to, your eyes open on that. That's ridiculous stats, even for college. I think he can be a really good piece. And obviously it's early. We got to see what happens in training camp and how he kind of fits into more of a pro offense. But he's definitely a guy I'm going to be keeping my eye on, because if he starts crawling up that depth chart and starts getting more touches with the 1s and the 2s, this is a guy that can hold down the fort for the first 6 weeks with a guy like Aaron Rodgers. He can catch out of the backfield. Obviously he has the explosive ability to break off long runs for touchdowns. But this is a guy obviously we're just going to keep watching training camp and see. But as a late round flyer, in the 12th, 13th, 14th round, I mean, this is a guy he can at least get you some early season wins if he's the guy there. I know you kind of had a little bit different of opinion, keeping in the same division, but go ahead with your guy.
Well, yeah, I mean, we talked about this on the side a little bit, and I don't differ on your opinion. I do agree that the early value will be there, and if he proves himself, as you've seen time and time before with other people, unless you're a Patriot, I should say that. Time and time again, you prove yourself early on, you're going to find yourself in the playbook often. And I think a guy like him with that speed, even if he doesn't keep himself in the backfield as much later in the latter end of the season, he's going to find himself playing out of the slot, playing himself out of the backfield on some 3rd down plays. They're going to try and find ways to get the speed in his hands and get the ball in his hands too. So I like another speedster, and it's more speed down in Miami. And that's Devon Achane. I mean, this guy here last year, 196 carries, 1,100 yards, 8 touchdowns. The guy runs 4.32 40. I think he's pure speed. And just think about Raheem Mostert there and how successful he was. I mean, what do you have, like a 6.1 average on rushing last year? He's a great running back too, already in Miami. But we're talking about Raheem Mostert 10 years younger. So, and somebody who doesn't have the injury bug that Mostert has had. So I like what Miami did grabbing him. I don't expect him to be coming out the gates swinging hot and their main guy. I mean, trust me, I've been surprised before. We could be wrong. However, I do expect over time on the season, even without injuries, but specifically with, that you will see this guy getting himself into the lineup and the ball will be in his hands. I mean, he can do plenty out the backfield receiving as well. He's had almost 1,000 yards 2 seasons in a row at A&M. I mean, we're talking about a small little running back with speed in the SEC. I know he could do it in the pros, and I'd like to just see how Mike McDaniel uses him. It's a guy I'm willing to take a chance on in the later rounds that somebody may not be thinking about because they want to try and grab a bigger name.
Yeah, I mean, what's crazy is last year, you had Raheem Mostert. I mean, Chase Edmonds was there. He got traded away. They had Raheem Mostert, and then they have Jeff Wilson. And those guys were getting drafted in the 13th, 14th round. So, like, I can see Achane just not getting drafted and just getting picked up off a waiver wire. I mean, I think he's worth a late round flyer, especially if you're in like a late round keeper. But that's kind of my issue with him is like, it's kind of the opposite of me where you're expecting early season production out of Izzy. And then you're maybe expecting some late season production out of Achane after he starts getting more reps or an injury happens. But with Raheem Mostert there and Jeff Wilson, they're both familiar with Mike McDaniel's offense. They're both familiar with what they want to do there. You would have to have 2 guys go down with injury in order for Achane to really have substantial fantasy value. Because what they want to do there is throw the football. They don't want to run the football as much. They want to spread the field. Now he has the home run ability. He has all the speed and all the intangibles that would make him a really good fit in that offense. But don't forget, too, is Miami was in trade talks to get Dalvin Cook. Like, that might not be over. So, again, these are guys. I agree. Yeah, these are guys that I think you can keep an eye on early and see what happens as we progress through the preseason and training camps. But I would agree, like, this is a guy that I have my eye on later in the draft. If he's there in the second to last round or the last round and I have an extra pick and an extra bench spot, like why wouldn't I want a guy like that can be explosive late season that you're just stashing for, if something happens to Mostert. And again, you're right. The probability of Mostert and Jeff Wilson getting hurt is pretty high compared to, other running backs because they both have injury history.
Yeah. And the thing to me is I'm talking about, I may take a guy like this instead of taking a second tight end, a tight end for a bye week or something like that. I'm taking a guy like this that I stash, and you may hold on to him for 8 weeks till he finally, has sort of maybe not even a breakout, but a decent enough game. And I'm expecting, flex play out of him. I'm not talking about running back 1 numbers, but flex play out of him, later in the season where you got yourself in a position and you need to make a move and you got to play somebody, and this guy's got the upside to get himself in the end zone and hit a home run. But yeah, and that's why we call them late rounders and flyers. And my guy I like maybe better towards the end of the season. The guy you like, I think, has more of an immediate impact to the Jets because of the injury to Breece Hall, and we don't know what his rehab's going to look like yet because running backs have been slower to come back from these injuries. They want to work them in slowly rather than try and get them in faster, because especially Breece, who looks like to be the future of the Jets backfield.
Right.
So, I mean, those are our running backs. Going over that again, that was Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, Izzy, and Achane. So we got some receivers. We don't have a lot. I mean, there's some big names that went off the board. I feel like we should just talk about the ones that we like. And let's kick it off with, out of the first 4 to go off the board in a row, you and I both agree Jordan Addison's got the best path to success and best path to fantasy value to start off the season.
Yeah, I mean, you look at, is he the most talented receiver that went in the first round? Like maybe not. Like he won best wide receiver in football 2 years ago, which we'll talk about the other guy who won last year a little bit. But Addison is a proven guy. He's going to come into a number 2 position right away. So the way I kind of look at it is, even with like JSN, he's going and sitting behind Metcalf and Lockett. Like, I don't see him beating out either one of those guys for a starting job. So he's going to be in the number 3 role at best to start the season. Addison immediately comes in and is a number 2 across from the best wide receiver in football on a team that throws the ball a lot. Yes. And that team can sustain 2,000-yard receivers. They've done it for years with Thielen. And so do we think Addison is at least equal to Thielen. And if we do, then this is a guy that's going to put up numbers this year. And he's not going to put up wide receiver 1 numbers. Don't get excited about him being a top 12 receiver, but this guy can easily be a top 25 receiver. And be in that solid wide receiver too. Like, he's in a great situation. And I think of all the receivers that were drafted in this draft, he's in the best situation coming in. Like, he didn't go to a wide receiver needy team that instantly he becomes a number 1 and is going to get lockdown corner after lockdown corner on him. You have to respect TJ Hawkinson and you have to respect Justin Jefferson. So Addison's going to be possibly the third option defensively to scheme against. And so he's going to get plus matchups all year long until he becomes better than Jefferson, which I don't think is going to happen, but he's going to get the corner too on every single game. And I think he's talented enough to beat corner number 2 on any of these teams. So I think he is the pathway for his success is the easiest out of any of these receivers.
No, don't forget KJ Osborne there, him being another outside receiver. I think with Addison's size and speed and his route running ability, I think he just puts himself in a win-win situation being picked by the Vikings. I agree with you 100%. I kind of connect him to Devonta Smith in the fact that this guy, he may not be as good of a route runner as Smith is, but you're going to a team. Just look at Smith last year with A.J. Brown. The guy would put up low wide receiver 1 numbers, like receiver 1 number, and that's the ceiling I see for Addison here. Because listen, Jefferson, JJ is going to do what he does. We know that, and Kirk has that rapport with him. But you get somebody that gives you Devonta Smith numbers and ability outside of your number 1 target. He's not quite a 1B. He is going to be the wide receiver 2, but you get those numbers right there. That guy is worthy of a solid pick and a chance on your team, and you're going to love to have him in your flex if you get him later on the draft, or you'll love him as your wide receiver 2.
Yeah, I mean, like I would say this guy is a guy I'd be looking for in that 4th, 5th round. When all the number 2s start coming off the board, that's where I would suspect that he's going to go. I would put him right there with a Tyler Lockett. Like, I would want Addison over him. Like, I think T. Higgins is by far the best wide receiver 2 on any team. So he's probably going to be the first wide receiver 2 to go off the board. But I think Addison's right there and can make an immediate impact. He can easily be a 1,000-yard receiver. I love the comparison to Devonta Smith because he has another guy that you have to respect on the other side. Mm-hmm. And so he's going to get, and he's still potentially was 1,000-yard. He's going to be a 1,000-yard receiver, or Devonta Smith was a 1,000-yard receiver before A.J. Brown got there, and now he just went into a more of that low-end wide receiver 1 number. Yeah, and that's kind of where I see Addison going.
I agree. The guy could play outside and he could play slot. I think he's a lot like Devonta Smith in that way. We're talking about a guy that's going to be more of a wide receiver 2 for his team just because you got someone like Justin Jefferson in front of it. Jalin Hyatt has, in my opinion, a pathway to wide receiver 1 on the New York Giants. And I'm not talking immediate start of the season. I don't expect that whatsoever. But I do expect this guy to take that ability and his speed and to take the top off the defense and use it. And I think Daboll is going to use that. I think they're going to find themselves spreading the field a little bit more, and hopefully, being a Giants fan here, that we get Saquon back. And when we do get him back, that's going to alleviate him coming out the backfield and rushing the ball too as well. It's going to make it a more dynamic offense than it was last year, which was more or less get the ball to whoever's going to catch it right now and whoever's healthy. And I like Isaiah Hodgins and I like Darius Slayton. I'm glad we got the 2 of those guys back. But this guy has another gear. He has the ability to make defenses have to play against that. And I think it's going to make someone like Isaiah Hodgins underneath a lot more effective as well. And so I just feel like the targets are going to start to flow fast when he gets comfortable with Daniel Jones.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't love the pick when the Giants made it. I think they didn't really address what they needed, which was a big body possession receiver that they could really shove the ball to. I think Hyatt's a great receiver. I think you nailed it. He could take the top off of defense. He's a polished route runner. But they have so many of those guys. Like they have Wandell Robinson. He's coming back from an injury. They have Isaiah Hodges, who came on late in the season last year. They have a deep threat with Darius Slayton. Sterling Shepard, if he gets re-signed to the team, like they still have these piece guys. And I think that's where Hyatt is he's still kind of that piece guy. Like what I can kind of see him later on becoming more of that wide receiver one if he develops a good rapport with Daniel Jones.
Yeah.
We'll see. I just don't. I don't love the Giants' passing game in general. I think the offense is good, but I just don't love their passing game because they are going to use all the weapons. It's not this funneling it to one guy. Like, do you see Isaiah Hodges or not Isaiah Hodges? Do you see Hyatt getting 10 receptions a game? Do you see him getting 8 receptions a game? Like, do you see that he's going to be more of that big play, getting four receptions in a game and hoping one of them is a deep ball that he can score a touchdown on? That's kind of where I see him, as kind of in that lower, sub 5 receptions per game. And he's got to be efficient with that if he's going to have some fantasy value and be a wide receiver one. So that's kind of where I see him.
Yeah. And trust me, I think that's his floor where you see him. I think his ceiling is more one of the he compared to Will Fuller, which, body wise and speed and the way he played was. And if you remember, Will Fuller was that speedster for the Texans when you had D-Hop there. But what happened when D-Hop left? And I'm going to bring it back to Hyatt, and why I'm saying this is when D-Hop left, you saw Will Fuller become more of an all-around receiver. He ran a bigger route tree because he had to, because he was the guy. He was the number one target there, and his volume went up. Now, he couldn't stay healthy, couldn't keep himself on the field, but Hyatt was pigeonholed in Tennessee because Tillman was there. And the reason he won the Biletnikoff Award was when Tillman was out for most of the season with his injury, Hyatt was the guy. He was the go-to guy. He ran a little bit bigger of a route tree, but it still was a lot more vertical. I think when I look at him, I see potential of somebody like a Stephon Diggs, who Stephon Diggs had speed. He took the top off teams. He caught the ball. He catches the ball really well with his hands and not with his body. But Diggs wasn't fully unlocked until after a couple years into his season, or a couple games into his season, a couple years into his career. And then now in Buffalo, where Dayball had him underneath him, he really got unlocked in Buffalo. Like, he was always decent as a Viking, but at Buffalo, he's a different receiver.
Yeah, I will say Diggs also had Thielen across from him to kind of develop. Like, is Hyatt going to come into a situation where they're going to rely on him to be the number one, the guy, the playmaker? Because there's no Thielen on the other side.
No.
In New York right now, and that's kind of my biggest issue with him. I think he has a lot of value. I think he's a guy that could potentially be a wide receiver too. I definitely don't see him in a wide receiver one conversation anytime soon.
No, I wouldn't call him wide receiver one for fantasy purpose, but I will call him the Giants wide receiver one. And if you like a piece of Dayball's offense, he's a guy to take a shot on. I mean, if you're going to sit there and be like, well, would I rather take a shot on Isaiah Hodges in a fantasy draft, or would I rather take a guy on Jalin Hyatt who has a bigger path for big playmaking? Both guys aren't going to be your wide receiver. Both guys aren't going to be your wide receiver twos off the immediate rip. Like, you're looking to flex one of those guys because of the potentials receivers that are above them in rankings. So that's where I see it. I just think he's the one receiver out of the rookie class that has a clearer pathway to possibly being the main receiver on his team.
Yeah,
whatever outlook that is.
The only difference is I think I can get Hodges in the 12th or 13th round, whereas like Hyatt's probably going to go in the 8th or 9th round.
Yeah, well, someone like me is probably going to try and take a chance on him.
Right. So like, what would you value more? Is like, because Hodges could be the better receiver there.
Yeah,
he already has. So I mean, like, again, it's early in the season, so this is a very early season reaction. We got training camp still left to go. I'm going to kind of repeat that throughout this. These are our initial reactions to where these guys got drafted. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, it's guys we like. And I mean, you talk about Adam Thielen. So why don't we talk about a guy that was drafted to Adam Thielen's new team, the Carolina Panthers, and Jonathan Mingo. I like this guy. I like the pick. This is who I wish the Giants would have gotten. They would have had to really trade up in the second round to get him. By all means, I like who we got in our center from our second round pick with Schmitz, but Mingo is a big body athletic receiver. He's raw. That's the one thing. What they say about Jackson Smith and Jigba. These guys are raw talent. They've got the physicality to play the game. He himself has only had 50 receptions in a single season in the SEC in any of his 4 years. So that's not a big stat number. The tread is still not worn on him. But that being said, Mingo himself, I think, and we just did a short on DJ Chark and on his pathway to being a big target out there. That muddies the water getting this draft pick with Mingo. I think Mingo could be the wide receiver 2 for this team because of his physicality and the big body he has. I think in a rookie quarterback and rookie receiver combo, I think it's a good rapport that they can build early on in camp. But I think this is a more difficult team to move yourself up in the pecking order at receiver.
Yeah, I mean, I love his potential. Let me start by saying that if he comes out and he's a freak of nature, he's a freak athlete, big strong receiver.
Yeah, 6'2", 215. You love that.
He has a problem with drops.
Yep.
He body catches the ball a lot.
Yep.
And so those are big issues for rookie receivers coming in. So is he ready to take that number 2 role from Chark or from Thielen? I don't see him immediately coming in. Again, this is going to be a guy I value kind of later on in the draft, and someone's going to go and snag him a little bit earlier. But if you think like Treylon Burks last year, he was a freak of nature, right? We all thought he was going to be way more involved in the offense than he was, and he just wasn't. And this is kind of I think the same situation that Mingo's in. It's he has all the potential in the world. He's just a freak athlete. But if he's not proven himself in practice, if he keeps having issues with dropping the ball and not catching the ball out with his hands, that's going to be an issue.
Yeah.
Especially when you have guys like Chark and Thielen who are very secure catchers. You want that with a rookie quarterback. There's other rookie wide receivers that I kind of like better than Mingo. I think his potential is through the roof. I mean, if he can get it all together, if he gets some good coaching, if he has a good training camp, if he starts really going through the practice and learning to catch with his hands more, cuts down on the drops, I think this guy could really, really blow the top off. And he could potentially take the wide receiver 1 position there. But there's a lot of question marks around him right now just because of those deficiencies.
Yeah.
So we'll kind of see again where the preseason goes, and if he starts working, and if he's a professional, if he comes in and he has a good work ethic, I think this is something where he can step into that role. But it's hard to tell with a lot of these rookie wide receivers that come in, especially when they're highly drafted.
Well, here's the only point I want to make on this one, and then I want to talk about some tight ends. But here's the big thing there. You got a rookie quarterback coming in. You've got an aging receiver. And you've got another receiver that's struggled to stay healthy. I mean, if I remember right, DJ Chark got hurt at the end of the Lions season too. But that being said, all 3 of these receivers we're talking about are all new to this team, and so is the quarterback. So that's why I think this is sort of less of a gamble for him to try and work his way into wide receiver 2 and more of a shot because he's not just the only new guy in town. And he gets himself an opportunity just as much as DJ Chark does. And, I mean, obviously Carolina brought in Thielen to probably be the veteran number 1 guy. But, again, I mean, we saw Thielen last year and the year before. He's not the Thielen he was 3, 4, 5 years ago. But that being said, the guy's a sure-handed receiver. He gets himself open. I think Mingo can learn a lot in training camp from him. And, again, the big-body receiver with a young quarterback, I think he'll find himself opportunities. And like I said, let's move on to talk about a couple tight ends. I mean, there's one tight end that I think we both agree on is a guy that we are going to like. And I don't know if you'd say he's going to find himself in the top 5 tight ends in the future. for fantasy, but I definitely could see him sneaking into the top 10, especially where he landed, and that's Dalton Kincaid. We talk about Josh Allen and his love for throwing to his tight ends, especially in the red zone, and he is just a better receiving tight end than Dawson Knox. And there's just no question about that. This guy was one of the best receiving, if not the best receiving tight end in college football. And last year, when you put up stats like 70 catches for 890, 8 touchdowns. He's got consecutive 8 touchdown seasons. This guy is a football magnet especially in the end zone. So I love this guy. If you fade tight end in your draft, here's a guy to take a chance on in the later rounds that, after those top 7 big names go off the board, and you don't want to be stuck playing tight end carousel.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some really interesting strategies that you could do at tight end this year. I think there are a lot of good rookie pass catching tight ends that got drafted this year, and so especially if you want to go in zero tight end and you don't want to go get one of those studs up top, and if you want to wait on some guys, go and grab 2 of the rookies and see who pans out. I think Kincaid's in a great scenario. You nailed it. He's a better Dawson Knox, and it's just another weapon for Allen in the red zone. But even with Dawson Knox last year, we thought he was going to really be a lot more productive than he was. And, even though Allen does like throwing to his tight ends, it's not where the volume goes. And so he's going to be touchdown reliant. I don't see him breaking 700, 800 yards. But he might have a lot of touchdowns because you're right. He is a football magnet. And when you get in the red zone, if they want to take the ball out of Josh Allen's hands, and they want to start throwing the ball a little bit more, they do use the tight ends down there in the red zone quite a bit. So he's just there's weapons around him. So again, he doesn't need to come in and be like the primary pass catcher, but he's going to get a lot of opportunities, and he's a good route runner, and he's good with the ball in the air. So yeah, I mean, he's in a great scenario.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at it and you look at teams with high passing volume, everybody thinks, when Tom Brady was in Tampa Bay. Everybody thinks, Minnesota and Kansas City. Buffalo's right up there. They're top 8 in passing attempts. Okay. And when you think about that, you can only throw the ball to your receivers so much before teams start to try and shut these guys down. And when you get an athlete like Kincaid is out of the tight end spot, you create mismatches, and we always talk about that term mismatch. When you talk about Darren Waller and you talk about, Gronk when he was in there. But in my opinion, you got the same type of mismatch out of this guy because he's a good route runner. He's got great hands. He's going to remind me of like a TJ Hawkinson, and I think that's where people expected him to go in the NFL draft this year. And they obviously, fell down, and Buffalo decided to jump up and get him before he was taken. But I still like this guy. This kid's going to be good. Like I said, 16 touchdowns in 2 seasons. I mean, he carries like a 13 yards per catch average. So I like him. There's a couple other, like you said, there's good pass catching receivers out there, and there's one guy that I'd like to highlight. But tell me about the guy that you were telling me about earlier that you would love to try and sneak onto your team, especially if you faded tight end.
Yeah, I mean, Mayer in Vegas, I think he's the best tight end in the draft, and we saw how disappointed that he was during the draft that he was not the first one off the board. I mean, look at his college numbers. They're absolutely ridiculous.
Oh, yeah.
This guy, all he does is catch the ball. Like, he is a polished tight end, and he's going to be a blocker. He's going to be a pass catcher. And you think about what Vegas likes to do at the tight end. I mean, even when Waller was hurt, they were very serviceable at the tight end. And then you add Jimmy G on top of that, who loves throwing to tight ends.
Yes.
I mean, this is a great scenario for a rookie pass catching tight end to get into. I mean, I think he has the biggest potential for any of the rookie tight ends in terms of being, if we're talking like, what rookie tight end do you think is going to break the top 6? This is my guy. Like, I think he could be a top 6 tight end. Like, his ceiling is up there with Kittle, with Goddard. He's right in that conversation immediately. And you have Devontae Adams on the outside. You have Jacoby Myers on the outside. You have Hunter Renfrow in the slot. So he's going to get open looks, and he's going to get open looks in the play action across in the middle, and he can do things with the ball after the catch. So I think he is primed for a breakout rookie season from the tight end position.
Yeah, I mean, really, he's got Austin Hooper and OJ Howard as the two guys he's competing with. And, OJ Howard's been that name that's popped around the different teams because of athleticism and all that, but he just can't put it together. And Hooper has bounced around too. And again, solid guy, but Mayer is definitely a better athlete, and I think a better overall, tight end all around. He's a good blocker. He's a good run blocker, and so I think at the end of the day, he's going to find himself in the lineup very, very fast. I think the Raiders got lucky.
We talked about Hooper in our first episode when we were talking about new faces and new places. When he went there, like instantly, there's potential there for him to have a good season because A, what Vegas likes to do with the tight ends, and B, because Jimmy Garoppolo loves throwing to tight ends. So now you insert the best pass catching tight end in a loaded draft class of pass catching tight ends, and he's the best of them. Yeah. I think it's just a win-win scenario. So if we liked Austin Hooper, we have to love Mayer.
Yeah, and I agree with you 100%. I like this guy. I think he's going to be fantastic. I also think there's another tight end out there that I like. I think there's two, and I kind of have – these are more ones if I'm going to fade tight end, and that's both Sam LaPorta and Luke Musgrave. Both go to situations that are beneficial to them. They may not be the better tight ends that out of the ones we just talked about, because I definitely think Mayer and Kincaid are the guys to look for out of the rookie class. But if you fade tight end late, you don't get any of these top 10 guys, top 12 guys. This is a chance to get a guy that you may not have to work on the tight end carousel or the streaming tight end every single week, because you have two receiving tight ends in both Musgrave and in Sam LaPorta. And Musgrave heading to Green Bay and LaPorta going to the Lions, two teams that always use their tight end. I mean, I know Hawkinson's role did change, and he failed to try and find as many targets in the past, but it's still a program that does use the tight end. And look at Dan Campbell on top of that is the coach there. And then obviously we know in Arizona, I know Aaron Rodgers loved his tight ends, and he's no longer going to be there. But that offense does love to use the tight end and always has, even before Rodgers, when it was Favre. So I think both guys land in beneficial places. Again, take a shot on one of these guys because they go to an offense that is going to maybe not feature the tight end, but use them a little bit more than get, one of these stat lines where it's like 2 receptions on 3 targets for 30 yards on your tight end, streamers.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this on LaPorta. I'll say this on both the guys. I mean, LaPorta, I think when Hawkinson was there, we thought Hawkinson had all the talent in the world. And then he goes to the Vikings, and look what kind of production he had. They used him more. I just don't think that the Lions want to use their tight ends as much as you might think. And so I think he has talent, but I just don't think the volume's there. Again, we kind of talked on it with Gibbs earlier. Like this team is built around speed and getting to the outside and breaking off big plays. And I just don't think LaPorta is going to have that, the volume of work. Like, is he going to be productive? Yeah, but like I think he's more in the line of what you just said, having 2 or 3 receptions for 30 or 40 yards. Like that's a stat line I could probably see from him more often than having, close to 100 and a touchdown. Like I think he probably doesn't break 5 touchdowns this season. And then with Musgrave, like I just don't know with Green Bay, like until Jordan Love takes the field and suits up and we kind of see what that offense is like, I don't trust any Green Bay Packer. I mean, Aaron Jones, Christian Watson, maybe. But until Love suits up, like we don't know what that offense could be terrible. Like
yeah, it could be.
They could be good. We just don't know. Is Musgrave a good pass catcher? Is he better? An upgrade from Tunyon? Yeah, I mean, I think so.
I think so.
They have a lot of receivers there now. And I just don't know what that offense is really going to look like under Jordan Love. So you can assume that with a younger quarterback in his first full season as a starter, that he's going to probably rely on more of the tight ends. But that's just an assumption. We just don't know. There's a lot of unknown there. Whereas I think there's other guys, especially like I just said, like there's a lot of pass catching tight ends that got drafted. There's a lot of good tight ends that just went to other teams. That I think Musgrave is a guy that like, yeah, he's going to be he's going to probably be the second of, if you're drafting 2 tight ends, he's going to be the second one that you're probably just taking a flyer on. But I think he can very well go undrafted as well.
No, I agree. And again, that's why I talk about him as these are streaming options that I'm willing to take a chance on. Because these guys here are going to places that historically use their tight end. And I'm willing to take a chance on one of these teams, liking one of their young guys that are decent route runners. I mean, I like Sam LaPorta a little bit more. I think he's a little bit more ready, and Musgrave is a little bit more green. He didn't have the number of receptions and routes run as LaPorta did. I mean, LaPorta had 2 seasons in a row of over 50 receptions. It's pretty good for a tight end, especially late round fantasy or even off the waivers earlier on. If you decide that the guy you picked up isn't the guy you want to use. So again, not the same caliber as the 2 guys we talked about. I completely agree with Mayer as being a favorite there, and Kincaid is just a great all-around athlete. I'd like to take a chance on either one of them if I don't get one of the top 3 guys, to be honest. And, I think someone like Mayer is a chance to, really step himself up into the, top 8 and Kincaid in the top 10.
Yeah, I mean, I think Mayer is a guy that I'm easily looking for in the 7th or 8th round. If I don't go and get, Kels or Kittle or Andrews, I think he has a potential. Like, do I like him over Goddard? I mean, maybe, because there's just so many pass catchers there. I think Mayer is in a really good scenario. That I just think that he's worth the flyer, like kind of overdrafting a little bit of all the tight ends. I know like last year there was like this big surge late before the draft on like Alberto. But
yeah,
like Greg Dulcich
say that too.
Greg Dulcich was a clear guy there. Yeah. Alberto did nothing. And I think that people reached on him, but I think if you go and reach on Mayer, like you're not going to be disappointed. And even with OJ Howard and Hooper there, I think that he's going to be the clear number 1. And going to win that job early in camp. So again, the tight ends are going to be more loaded than you think this year. I think that there's a lot more pass catching tight end talent in the league, and you have more than 5 years ago when there was only 3 or 4 tight ends that were viable. Now you have maybe 10 to 12 guys that are viable that can be every week starters in the league. So. Tight end is going to be an interesting position in the draft this year.
Yeah, and don't be fooled by the numbers when you go back and look at stats last year too, because I had on my squad, I had 2 of the top 12 guys with Njoku and Everett, and those 2 guys were great. I flip-flopped them week by week based on matchups, but those were opportunity plays with Keenan Allen being out for a period of time, and then Mike Williams being out a period of time, and Donald Parham being out for so long, and then Njoku. It was really Cooper and Njoku at that team, So when you look at it in the grand scheme of it all, both teams got more pass catchers there, and there's more talent and better talent that are going to jump those guys in terms of, in my opinion, my rankings. I don't think they're bad athletes. I don't think they're bad tight ends. I just think they're in worse opportunities going into this year. So don't be fooled by some stats from last year, and don't be afraid to take a chance on, like Chris just said, it was 8th round, taking a chance on a guy like Mayer if you didn't get one of the top guys that you wanted. So thanks for tuning in this week, guys. Next week, we like to talk to you guys about standard fantasy scoring and why we think standard fantasy is the new king. Don't forget like, subscribe. There you go. Like, subscribe,
thumbs up,
and
man.
share with all your friends. And tune in next week for our standard fantasy scoring breakdown. And we'll be starting soon on our way too early mock draft 1.0. Thanks all.